2019, the state of New Jersey puts into this effect a special ruling for limited breweries, which was a whole laundry list of imposed restrictions. So food trucks were no longer allowed. You couldn't host more than 25 special events per year, which we'll get into. That includes anything advertised beyond the brewery, trivia, fundraisers, just anything that's you post on social media, DJs, televised sports championships, which I think that's where you lost me on that one. It's like having a game on the TV counts as an event, which is absurd. But all of this said and done was to somehow balance the competition between all of the microbreweries and then of all the thousands of bars, restaurants, and liquor stores. So first off, why did this come into play? It now came into effect over the summer, but what was the reasoning behind this law? How has the fight been over the years? Tell us the perspective from you as the business owner.
So in order to really understand it, you have to go back about 10 years. Okay. So essentially what was happening is that, all over the country, as we know, the brewery, it's not just breweries, distilleries, cideries, whatever, meaderies, whatever had, started opening all over the country. Other states obviously were seeing the financial and the economic benefit of that. State of New Jersey at that point had 3 breweries, okay, in the entire state, going back to like 2010, 2011. All right. One of which was a manufacturing-based brewery, Flying Fish. But most of the breweries in the state, the biggest brewery was Anheuser-Busch, right out of Newark, But in terms of like craft breweries, microbreweries, absolutely non-existent, because the way the laws were set up in Jersey, it made it almost impossible and very cost prohibitive to be able to start a brewery from scratch. So, this was a movement that had been pushed for a while, to the point where Chris Christie actually allowed the law to be passed that allowed what's called a limited brewery license. Okay, so this is a license that allows you to have a tasting room. It allows you to serve pints to the public, and basically have a small brewery that without spending $1 million. Let's put it that way. Which was really the only option you had before then. So the state was reacting to, at what PwC we would call a mega trend. You know what I mean? This is something that's happening at a global level, not just a national, but and they see the economic benefit of it. The issue in New Jersey is that the laws around alcohol licensing go back to post-prohibition era, and are based on population. Okay, so I think the number is there's one license per 3,000 people in the state of New Jersey. So essentially, you have created this scarcity in the market. All right, and it's artificial, right? So you are limiting the number of the supply of the number of licenses that are allowed. So what does that do? That drive, and by the way, those licenses, even though they only cost a couple $1,000s to buy a license from the state, they are bidded on the open market. Okay, so therefore you have licenses in the state of New Jersey that are worth $2-3 million just for the privilege to serve alcohol at your establishment.
Insane. That's crazy.
Okay, so you have this, and this has been something that has been, happening for 50 years in the state plus, right? So you have a generational structural economy that is based on, these licenses being bought and sold on the market itself. Over 30% of the licenses in New Jersey are called pocket licenses, meaning that they're pocketed. They're not actually used. They're used basically as a commodity or an investment. I want to buy a license in a certain area. Maybe there's a town of 20,000 people. There might be 3 licenses available. I'm going to pay, $50,000 for those 3 licenses, and I'm going to just sit on them for years, whatever it is. Or it'll be, but you have this, so you basically have this system where, these licenses are bought and sold, and they're not a license anymore. Really, they're closer to a commodity or a stock or a real estate investment. Okay, because and the state, and that is the system that the state has set up. Okay, so of course, when you come along and then you allow breweries to be able to produce their own and create their own alcohol, wineries as well, but wineries had a head start for about 20 years and are also very closely aligned with the Department of Agriculture in the state. So therefore, they have a lot more leeway than breweries. Okay. But breweries came along after this law was passed in 2012. And as soon as it was passed, bars, restaurants, the 6,000 license holders were all over it because they were intimidated and afraid that this would, number one, devalue the license, number two, create an unrealistic competitive situation where suddenly, the perspective of somebody who paid, $500,000 for their license and has a brewery open up in the same town, and only pays a couple $1,000s a year. Okay. So they kind of flooded the state with, when I say the state legislature, and especially the ABC, the alcohol beverage control, that say that we need to get a handle on this. This is not fair. Okay. And therefore it took about 5 or 6 years, but the state turned around with a lot of pressure, a lot of lobbying pressure from the 6,000 license holders and their political action committee, and a lot of money that was channeled into this effort to place these incredible restrictions on breweries in the, things like not allowing us to even have a menu, a food menu in the brewery, being limited to 25 events a year. And even, as you mentioned, whether that's showing a football game or showing a playoff game, even the size of the TV has to be less than 65 inches. Okay. Because what they don't want breweries to become are sports bars, for example. So they have all of these restrictions. Even the ABC is telling us that, you can advertise an event and put up a poster in the four walls of your establishment, of your brewery. But if you actually take and say, let's say if I'm having a musician on Friday night, now this is real. Okay, I'm not kidding. They're saying that you have to actually put up a poster to let people know that you're having this event. Therefore, it's not counted against you. But as soon as I post that on social media, Instagram, Facebook, what have you, that suddenly becomes one of my 25 events a year. Okay?
Now, what if the musician posts on Instagram that, hey, I'm going to be at Death of the Fox? Does that count?
As long as they are aware that you were aware of it and you did nothing about it, the brewery is still liable for that. Eventually, like the thing is, yes. So the state is basically saying that we can't be in any type of communication or collusion with anybody about getting out the message about, what's happening in our own organizations, in our own businesses. And the number 25 is completely arbitrary. There's nothing we tried to understand, well, why 25 events a year? Well, why not?
It's not even, you can't even, that's 2 a month. That's 2 a month.
We're open,
I think was it you, Will, that did out the math that it would be done in, you would hit your limit if you showed 1 week of March Madness. Just right. 1 week. That's it.
My Phillies who went to the World Series last year, I used 5 events, 5 out of my 25 events, just to show playoff and World Series games. Now, how can you even predict that? And the clock resets at the beginning of the year. Okay. So if you think about it, Oh, and that's the other thing, is that you have to give 10 days notice on any time that you have an event. You have to give the state, you have to file with the state and give them 10 days notice that you are having this event, so they can notify township council, the police department, and the township clerk that you are having trivia night, or a guy playing an acoustic guitar, or you're showing a World Series game.
But the Phillies, they win the championship game, and what is that, 2-3 days later until the World Series?
That's my point. So then we had to go to them. They didn't even think this out, guys. Like, they literally did not. They said, okay, if you show a championship game, that counts as one of your 25 events. But of course, you have to give 10 days notice in order to get approved for that event. And how would you know 10 days notice that the Phillies made the World Series? So we brought this up to them, and they said, oh yeah, our bad. I guess you can just let us know. We'll make an exception. We had to make, so they did a special ruling to their own special ruling that allowed, because they knew that it was impossible to enforce.
Right. Like, I feel like as you're going through this, it all just seems so arbitrary and, sort of, whatever. You made a comment. It's like, well, why 10 days? And it's why not? Or why 25 events? And it's why not 25? But regardless, you're doing something about it, right? So where does this stand, Chuck? And, where are we at now, sort of, in this fight to at least make some progress? Maybe not necessarily get it overruled, but at least the restrictions maybe will ease up a bit.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of history before, because essentially they first attempted to pass all of this stuff in 2018. They passed it in the fall of 2018. We led a group of breweries to put together a petition to get 35,000 signatures. We got 35,000 signatures within 2 weeks. They suspended the ruling. Okay, great. Victory. It was even more restrictive. It was crazy, right? Then they come back 9 months later. New governor is elected. New director. The director that issued that first ruling was fired. Okay. I can't go much more into that, but for obvious reasons. The next director comes in, issues almost the same ruling, adds to that ruling that breweries now are no longer allowed to sell coffee. We are a brewery and coffee roastery.
Who came at your neck? Who came at your neck?
Well, then we had to get our lawyers involved. So we're used to doing this, because then we had to get our lawyers involved, of course, because that was our entire business plan that was approved by the state 5 years before then, that we were a brewery, and we are grandfathered in right now as the only brewery out of 141 breweries in the state of New Jersey that can also serve coffee. So they actually went after that, and that is actually in the books, saying that no other brewery, or that a brewery can't serve coffee to its customers. But basically, so that's the history. They came back, they reissued it, and then COVID hit. And so once COVID hit in 2020, they kind of stepped back, and there wasn't much enforcement. I mean, our tasting room was closed for 7 months. So that was a challenging time where the state did the right thing there. They allowed us to have outdoor permits so we could do beer gardens and things like that, so we could continue getting some type of revenue. And we were encouraged by that. We thought maybe they've turned a corner. Maybe they're going to be sympathetic now, right? So then, 2021 comes along, and things start slowly getting, clearing up from COVID. We're getting back to normal hours and everything. And then all of a sudden we started hearing rumors that the state was going to go full on with enforcement of the ruling that they issued in 2019. And then with 2 weeks notice in June of 2022, they passed 18 conditions, very punitive, strict conditions printed on all of our licenses, saying that we're, all the things that we just mentioned, 25 events a year, requirement of having to do a tour, no coordination with any food trucks whatsoever. If you have a food truck outside your brewery, you will get fined. But especially for us, the 25 events was, we have live music. I'm a huge music guy. I have music here all the time, especially, and then being able to show sports games, things like that. It all came very, very quickly, added to our license. And that's why we felt like we had no choice but to turn around and to sue the state on 2 grounds. Number one, they did not go through the proper rulemaking notification process with a public review and comment period. That's required for any time you do anything like this. They actually said in 2019 they were going to do that. They never did it. Okay, so that's the heart of our lawsuit. But the second part is strictly First Amendment stuff. You cannot tell a business that they cannot, where they can be able to get their message, be able to promote their business through, saying that, well, certain events you cannot use Instagram, you cannot use Facebook, all of this stuff. It's a plain and simple First Amendment violation. And, there's a lot of precedent for that. So, we have a legal website with the Pacific Legal Foundation, who is representing us pro bono. They were started by Ronald Reagan in the 70s in the state of California. So they have a pretty good track record when it comes to this type of stuff. And they did a fantastic job. We filed our legal brief last month. The lawsuit is now, currently the state has 30 days to respond. And we should have a hearing sometime in the spring. So that's just the short term to get the ruling, the unrealistic, crazy ruling with all of this stuff. So, because we've seen a drop in business, especially Friday and Saturday nights, when we typically have musicians and things like that, it's tough to keep people in the seats.